In the fathomless black of the outer rim, where dying stars flickered like distant bioluminescence, cruised the Glarghonian armada. Imagine, if you will, a civilization evolved not on land, but in the crushing depths of a methane ocean, beneath the ice crust of a forgotten moon. The Glarghonians, bulbous bioluminescent beings encased in armored exoskeletons, their thoughts as regimented as their perfectly synchronized swimming patterns. For millennia, the Glarghonian Empire had expanded through conquest, their fleets carving paths through the cosmos with ruthless efficiency. Every action, every thought, meticulously documented and approved by the High Council. Deviation was unacceptable. One standard cycle, while patrolling the desolate expanse near the Gamma Quadrant, a scout vessel registered an anomaly. A small, brightly colored object drifted aimlessly through the void, defying all known laws of physics and good taste. Protocol dictated immediate investigation. The object was retrieved. Scans revealed it to be of artificial origin, composed of compressed cellulose fibers and vibrant non-toxic dyes. It was roughly rectangular with numerous leaves bound together along one edge. In other words, it was a book. A children's book, to be precise, though the Glarghonians were far from understanding that at this stage. This discovery, as insignificant as it seemed, would soon send ripples of confusion and ultimately perhaps a little bit of change through the cold heart of the Glarghonian Empire. The Glarghonian Science Council, a collection of the Empire's most brilliant and most rigidly structured minds, gathered in the grand hydroanalysis chamber. The book lay suspended in a tank of nutrient-rich fluid, its pages gently turning under the careful scrutiny of a dozen multispectral scanners. Their initial assessment was perplexing, to say the least. "The object displays no discernible offensive capabilities," droned Counselor Gleepglorp, his bioluminescent patterns flashing in agitation. Yet, its intricate design suggests a purpose, beyond mere aesthetics which frankly are offensive in themselves. Another counselor, Bloopborg, adjusted his hydrovisor. The arrangement of symbols, they seemed to form a narrative sequence. Could this be some form of encoded psychological warfare, a weapon designed to infiltrate our minds? The Glarghonians, being paragons of logic and order, struggled with anything that smacked of abstraction. Metaphors were anathema, symbolism a sign of weak thinking. The book, with its colorful illustrations and simple text, was an enigma wrapped in a riddle, submerged in a tank of nutrient fluid. Page after page, they meticulously documented the book's contents. A drawing of a bright yellow sun sent the Astrophysics Division into weeks of panicked calculations. Its cheerfully inaccurate depiction defied all known stellar models. An illustration of a smiling cow caused similar consternation among the bioengineers. Its anatomy was wrong, utterly, bafflingly wrong. The text, of course, proved to be the most troublesome element. Simple sentences like, "see spot run," were dissected, analyzed, and ultimately deemed to be complex triggers for some unknown form of cognitive manipulation. The idea that something could be simple, straightforward, or dare they even think it, fun, was completely beyond their comprehension. They were convinced they had found a weapon of immense, if baffling, power. Meanwhile, deep within the Glarghonian Maximum Security Detention Center, a figure reclined on a surprisingly comfortable, if somewhat damp, algae foam mattress. This was Dave, human, and currently a guest of the Glarghonian Empire. Dave had been scooped up on the fringes of explored space, his battered freighter mistaken for a rogue asteroid during a particularly zealous patrol. He wasn't exactly thrilled about his current situation, but truth be told, he'd been in worse pickles before. He had a knack for finding trouble, and an even greater knack for not taking it too seriously. News of the weapon and the Council's utter bafflement had filtered down even to the detention level. Dave had mostly ignored it, assuming it was just another example of alien overreaction to something perfectly mundane. But then, the heavy, watertight door to his cell hissed open, and two heavily armed Glarghonian guards gestured him forward with their electric prods. "The High Council requires your expertise," one of the guards gurgled, his voice distorted by his helmet's vocal modulator. Dave raised an eyebrow. My expertise? Last time I checked, my expertise was limited to making toast with a fusion reactor and avoiding paperwork. You sure you got the right guy? The guards naturally didn't understand sarcasm. They just prodded him harder. Soon, Dave found himself standing before the assembled science council. The mysterious book still, suspended in its tank. Counselor Gleepglorp fixed him with a beady, unblinking stare. "Human," he intoned, "we believe you possess knowledge pertaining to this artifact. Explain its function." Dave squinted at the book. It looked vaguely familiar. "Hang on," he said, scratching his chin. "Is that the very hungry caterpillar? I used to read this to my niece." A ripple of confused gurgles went through the council. This was not the response they had anticipated. "Explain," Gleepglorp demanded, his bioluminescence dimming with what Dave could only interpret as frustration. Dave grinned. This was going to be fun. All right, Dave said, leaning against the observation tank with a casualness that clearly unsettled the Glarghonians. "So the very hungry caterpillar, right? It's, a tactical manual. A guide to overwhelming force." Counselor Gleepglorp adjusted his spectacles, a faint clicking sound echoing in the chamber. "Tactical? It depicts consumption of foodstuffs." Dave nodded sagely. "Exactly. It's about strategic acquisition of resources. See the caterpillar? That's your ground forces. Insatiable, relentless. They devour everything in their path to fuel, the pupation phase." A younger-looking counselor, Bloop Gloop, raised a tentacle. "Pupation? Is this some form of biological warfare? A chrysalis bomb?" Dave stifled a laugh. "Even better, it's about transformation. The caterpillar becomes a butterfly, a beautiful, deadly aerial predator. Think of it as air superiority, achieved through sheer gluttony." The Glarghonians exchanged worried glances. The implications of such a strategy were disturbing. "And the various foods?" Gleepglorp pressed, pointing a pseudopod at a holographic projection of the book's pages. "The plum, the sausage? Those are strategic targets," Dave explained, his voice dripping with mock seriousness. "Each one represents a key infrastructure point. The caterpillar doesn't just eat them, it neutralizes them, disrupts enemy supply lines. The sausage? That's clearly a heavily fortified munitions factory." Bloop Gloop scribbled furiously on his datapad. "Note: sausage-shaped structures are high-priority targets. Deploy caterpillar units for immediate neutralization." Gleepglorp, however, seemed less convinced. "But it ends with the caterpillar becoming a butterfly, a creature of beauty. Surely this is not a weapon of war." Dave shrugged. "That's the genius of it. It's psychological warfare. The butterfly represents the ultimate victory, so complete and utter that it transcends mere destruction. It's about demoralizing the enemy with aesthetically pleasing airborne units." He paused for effect, then added, "Plus, butterflies are really hard to shoot down. All that erratic fluttering makes them almost impossible to target." The Glarghonians murmured amongst themselves, clearly struggling to reconcile the horrifying implications of Dave's explanations with the seemingly innocent nature of the book. "And the sun on Sunday?" Gleepglorp asked hesitantly, pointing to another page. Dave beamed. "Ah, the sun. That's the ultimate weapon, a concentrated burst of pure energy delivered on the seventh day. It's a Sunday surprise, if you will." The counselors recoiled, imagining the devastation a Sunday surprise might unleash. This weapon is far more dangerous than we initially assessed," Gleepglorp declared, his voice trembling slightly. "We must proceed with extreme caution." Dave just grinned, enjoying the chaos he was sowing with a simple children's book. Gangchi, Glarghonian High Command, convinced they now possessed the key to ultimate victory, immediately began integrating the very hungry caterpillar strategies into their war games. The results were, to put it mildly, catastrophic. Rigid adherence to procedure, a Glarghonian hallmark, clashed violently with Dave's absurd interpretations. The first exercise involved simulating a caterpillar advance on a fortified enemy position. Instead of a calculated siege, battalions of Glarghonian soldiers were ordered to consume vast quantities of kelp patties, the Glarghonian equivalent of rations, before engaging the enemy. The objective, according to the newly revised battle plan, was to achieve maximum gluttony before initiating the assault. Unfortunately, the Glarghonian digestive system was not designed for rapid kelp patty consumption. Mass indigestion ensued, leaving the soldiers bloated, sluggish, and in no condition to fight. The enemy, a squad of bewildered trainees, easily captured the incapacitated troops. High Command deemed the exercise a valuable learning experience, though the precise lesson remained unclear. Next came the sausage neutralization drill. Following Dave's advice, a squadron of elite fighters was dispatched to destroy a sausage-shaped training drone. Instead of using torpedoes or lasers, however, they were instructed to ram the drone, with their battlesuits, consuming it in a symbolic act of aggression. The drone, built to withstand considerable impact, remained largely intact. The fighters, on the other hand, suffered extensive damage to their exoskeletons. The exercise ended with several injured pilots and a slightly dented sausage drone. High Command muttered something about unforeseen tactical variables. The most disastrous outcome, however, stemmed from the attempt to implement the Sunday surprise. On the designated day, the Glarghonian fleet gathered in formation, awaiting the signal to unleash the sun's concentrated energy burst. The signal never came. No one knew how to weaponize the sun. Instead, the fleet spent the entire day basking in solar rays, much to the confusion of their enemies and the growing frustration of the High Commander. The only result was a collective sunburn, a rare and unpleasant experience for the aquatic Glarghonians. The Sunday surprise was quietly shelved, deemed too unpredictable for practical application. Throughout these exercises, Dave watched from his observation tank, barely able to contain his laughter. The Glarghonians, completely oblivious to the true nature of the weapon they wielded, were tearing their own military strategies apart. Their rigid protocols, once a source of strength, had become their undoing. He thought, maybe I should have told them about the part where the caterpillar gets a tummy ache. But amidst the chaos and confusion, a seed of doubt began to sprout in the mind of the Glarghonian High Commander Thrax. He'd risen through the ranks on logic and strategic thinking, and something about this whole situation felt off. The battle. Simulations were turning into aquatic circuses. Their once feared military was becoming a laughingstock, and all based on the advice of one seemingly unconcerned human. Thrax began to suspect that Dave's interpretations were not entirely on the level. The human seemed far too amused, too relaxed for someone supposedly assisting in the deployment of a weapon of immense psychological power. A true weapon, especially one so subtle, should inspire awe, fear, or at the very least serious consideration, not barely concealed giggles. He initiated a discreet surveillance operation, diverting resources from the kelp patty rationing program to install hidden hydro cameras in Dave's observation tank. Thrax wanted to see the human's true face, his unguarded reactions, away from the formal interrogations. What he observed only deepened his suspicions. Dave spent most of his time lounging in the filtered water, occasionally performing lazy somersaults or blowing bubble rings. He'd often stared directly at the cameras with a knowing smirk, as if fully aware of the scrutiny. There was no sign of the grim determination, the calculating intellect, that Thrax would expect from someone wielding a weapon of such profound influence. What struck Thrax most was Dave's utter lack of fear. The Glarghonians, for all their military might, inspired a certain degree of terror. They were ruthless, efficient, and utterly devoid of sentimentality. Yet Dave treated them with a casual indifference, bordering on contempt. He cracked jokes, made sarcastic remarks, and generally behaved as if he were on a rather dull vacation. This absence of fear was illogical. Was Dave truly a master strategist, so confident in his abilities that he felt no threat? Or was he simply mocking them? Thrax felt a cold ripple of anger beneath his gills. The Glarghonian Empire was not, accustomed to being mocked. The High Commander decided it was time for a more direct approach. He would confront Dave, face to face, and demand the truth. The next day, Thrax entered Dave's observation tank unannounced, his elite guard flanking him. The water shimmered with an unnatural tension. Dave, mid-somersault, paused and treaded water, a quizzical look on his face. Well, if it isn't the big cheese himself, to what do I owe the pleasure? Thrax ignored the flippant tone. Human, your explanations of this weapon have led to unsatisfactory results. Our strategies are in disarray. Our warriors are questioning their purpose. Explain yourself. His voice, amplified by a modulator, echoed through the tank. Dave feigned innocence. I'm just telling you what the, manual says. You guys are the military masterminds. Not me. Maybe you're not implementing the strategies correctly? Have you tried turning it off and on again? Thrax's eyes narrowed, a gesture that could curdle Krill at 50 paces. Do not play games with me, human. I have observed you. Your amusement, your lack of concern, it is inconsistent with the gravity of the situation. Tell me the truth. What is this book really? Dave sighed dramatically, splashing a bit of water. All right, you got me. It's not a weapon, okay? Well, not in the way you guys think. It's just a story. A kid's story, actually. He gestured to the book, still lying on the waterproof table. It's called The Very Hungry Caterpillar. Thrax stared blankly. The Very Hungry. What now? Is this some kind of code? No code, Dave chuckled. It's literally about a caterpillar. He eats a lot of food, gets a tummy ache, then builds a cocoon and turns into a butterfly, that's it. The Glarghonians exchanged confused glances. This was not the devastating psychological weapon they had envisioned. Thrax, despite himself, felt a flicker of something. Was this human truly suggesting that they had been terrorized by a tale of larval gluttony? He struggled to maintain his composure. Explain. This caterpillar, how does it translate into military strategy? What is its psychological effect? Dave grinned, finally seeming to enjoy himself. Well, that depends on how you look at it. See, the caterpillar, he just keeps eating, right? Never satisfied. Takes and takes and takes until he can barely move. Sound familiar? Dave leaned, back in the water, a glint in his eye. Think about it, Commander. The caterpillar devours everything in its path. It doesn't care about the orchards it strips bare, the leaves it decimates. All it cares about is its own insatiable hunger. He paused for effect, letting the words sink in. Your empire, your relentless expansion, isn't it a bit like that caterpillar? Consuming planet after planet, resource after resource, all in the name of what? Progress? Conquest? A bigger tummy? Thrax's usually placid face flickered, with something akin to comprehension. The analogy, delivered with Dave's characteristic bluntness, struck a chord. He had always justified the Empire's actions as necessary for survival, for the greater good of the Glarghonian people. But Dave's words painted a different picture, one of unchecked gluttony disguised as noble purpose. The elite guards shifted, uncomfortably, their clicking mandibles betraying their unease. The concept of equating their glorious empire with a worm was deeply unsettling. One of them started to protest, but Thrax silenced him with a sharp gesture. And the butterfly? Thrax asked, his voice barely a modulated whisper. What of its significance? Dave shrugged. That's the kicker, isn't it? The caterpillar eats, and eats, then transforms into something beautiful, something new. But the thing is, it can only transform after it stops eating, after it's locked itself away and reflected on what it's done. He pushed himself off the side of the tank, floating effortlessly. Maybe the caterpillar is the Glarghonian Empire now, but it doesn't have to be. It can choose to become something more, something that doesn't just take but also gives back. The silence in the observation tank was thick enough to choke a kelp fish. The weight of Dave's words hung heavy in the water. A children's story, A tale of simple metamorphosis had somehow pierced the heart of the Glarghonian war machine. Thrax stared at the book on the table, then back at Dave, his expression unreadable. He saw not a prisoner, not a threat, but a mirror reflecting a disturbing truth about his own empire. The very hungry caterpillar, a metaphor indeed. The observation chamber fell silent. The Glarghonians, a species whose lives were dictated by rigid protocols and unwavering logic, were adrift in a sea of introspection. Dave's flippant yet insightful comparison had thrown their entire worldview into disarray. The council members, usually so quick to analyze and strategize, found themselves grappling with concepts that lay far outside their established parameters. Was their empire, built on centuries of conquest, truly nothing more than a ravenous, unthinking consumer? The question hung in the air unanswered and deeply unsettling. The initial reaction was, predictably, denial. Many dismissed Dave's words as the ramblings of a primitive, illogical species. How could a simple children's tale possibly hold any relevance to the complex realities of interstellar politics and military strategy? But the seed of doubt had been planted. Whispers of dissent began to circulate within the ranks, quiet at first but growing in volume as the implications of the story began to sink in. The relentless expansion, the subjugation of weaker species, the insatiable hunger for resources. Was it all truly justified? High Commander Thrax, however, remained an enigma. Publicly, he maintained a stoic facade, dismissing the incident as a minor distraction. But in the privacy of his own chambers, he found himself drawn back to the small, brightly colored book. He would spend hours examining the simple illustrations, tracing the caterpillar's journey with his clawed finger, pondering the deeper meaning behind its insatiable appetite. Was this, he wondered, a glimpse into the true nature of his own empire? A warning, perhaps, of the consequences of unchecked ambition? He secreted the book away in a hidden compartment within his personal quarters, a space normally reserved for top-secret battle plans and classified intelligence reports. The very hungry caterpillar now sat alongside the most crucial documents of the Glarghonian Empire, a silent testament to the power of a simple story to shake even the most rigid of foundations. Years passed in the swirling currents of the Glarghon homeworld. The empire, once a relentless tide of conquest, showed subtle signs of change. Expansion slowed, not with a crash, but a quiet ebbing. Diplomacy, once a tool of manipulation, became a genuine avenue for negotiation. Resource consumption, though still immense, faced new scrutiny, new debates about sustainability. No one could pinpoint the exact moment the shift began, nor would any Glarghonian admit the influence of a human storybook. Yet deep within the High Commander's private vault, a tattered copy of the very hungry caterpillar remained. The weapon, it turned out, was not one of destruction, but of reflection, and its impact resonated far beyond what anyone, especially a certain sarcastic human named Dave, could have possibly imagined.